Good morning. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us. We appreciate your company here on the broadcast and as well welcome your contributions. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya. At Ayub Abdikadir. Later we sample some of your feedback towards the tail end of this broadcast. We are discussing the cost of demonstrations, and a day after the opposition chief Raila Odinga upped the tempo on the government in regards to what he says is the cost of living crisis in the country, and that Thursday next week will be an extra day in the week for the opposition supporters to take to the street in pushing the government. The president, however, maintains that it's time for service delivery, and speaking in the county of Kisii yesterday, called for what he says shelving of political ambitions, and that it's time to roll up the sleeves and serve the Kenyan people. With me in studio as stakeholders, Boniface Gashoka is the Secretary General, Bar, Hoteliers and Liquor Association of Kenya. Kevin Mubadi is the National Chairperson, the Border Association of Kenya. Simon Kimutai, who is joining us virtually, is the National Chairperson, Matatu Owners Association of Kenya, and Same Karanja is the Chief Executive Officer for the Medium, Small and Micro Enterprises Alliance of Kenya. I was on you, Kevin,
yes,
and pick up from where you left. Will this then leave you as a stakeholder worse off, since many Kenyans depend on the border sector for easy mobility in beating traffic snarl-ups?
Yes, this one will leave us worse off because one, there's no income as it is used to be. Secondly, you know, the border sector is the last mile deliveries. We deliver to the last mile, and when Kimutai ferries his people to the stage, then we pick them there, drop them home. That chain is being now broken because we cannot complete the chain. Secondly, as the border sector, many parents depend on us to take their children to school. Then that also means children will not make it to school. Okay, the school environment can be secure for them maybe, but how will they reach there? Because their parents depend on us to take their children to school. And secondly, you know, the border rider, you cannot face a police officer with a motorcycle. If there is the worst mistake you can make is to meet a police officer during the rioting with your motorcycle. You might never see that motorcycle again. So this makes our people to fear even appearing in the streets for their daily business. So it is really causing a lot of harm to us as the border sector. And if you look at also the mamambogas, they also depend on us to ferry their goods to the market and even ferry them back home in the evening. So the whole supply chain is being distracted by the demonstration in this country. And that, I think, economically it has really affected, and it is going to affect now that we are having 2 days a week. It is going to affect a lot the economic system of this country.
Mm-hmm. Boniface, and this is rather a predictable problem. It's political. It's the conduct of the politicians in Kenya, and often after every electoral cycle, there are uncertain times that often engulf the country. For the unpredictable times like when COVID-19 hit the country, you guys were affected. But there was a plan as to the way out in terms of limiting spacing, in terms of the number of people you can have. How then, as a stakeholder, do you, going forward, call for the end of this because of its predictable nature of the people who cause it and why they cause it? And what will be your call to them as key stakeholders to find a permanent solution to this problem that always has adverse effects on you as an industry?
You've mentioned COVID, and I remember I was in the forefront on calling on the previous president to make sure that we given a chance, and we participated in drafting all that. But I want to relate this problem with COVID. Mm-hmm. Right now, the liquor industry is operating worse off than during COVID. We are actually operating at a very low in terms of performance. And maybe to be specific, because we've already done a few computations. Every day when there is a demonstration, we are losing sales worth 300 million. KRA,
that's every day?
Yeah, every day.
300 million?
300 million
when there are demonstrations?
Worth of sales.
Okay. Oh, but, so this is liquor?
Yeah, this is liquor.
Earlier on,
this is that is the whole in terms of you know, we not only sell liquor, we also sell other things like veggies and all the meals and what have you.
Okay.
So Balita members, they lose 300 million worth of sales. We also lose worth of purchases. We are losing around 150 million.
Okay.
Whenever there is all that. Then there is the taxman who collects a lot of money from us. He's losing 200 million per day. This is going to have a very strong impact on how we're going to report at the end of the day and how many businesses are going to be sustained. Like, for example, by the end of next week, we are predicting a reduction of casuals. We're going to reduce the number of casuals by 50%. We support around 560,000 employees in this country. So by the end of next week, if things remain constant, majority of the casuals, we're going to relieve them. And these are our children, and these are people going to be affected. Maybe on the other side of the impact to the economy, the dollar has really been weakening. Majority of the goods that we transact, especially on the side of the manufacturers, though even us, even some of the things that we trade on are imported. That is greatly affecting our business and is going to have a huge impact. That is the impact on the economy. That is the impact on the industry. The other thing is the additional costs that are coming with Mandamano. As we headed towards the next phase of Mandamano, we will be forced to hire policemen to accompany to accompany the transport of our goods. This time is liquor. We'll be forced to do that. That is for the distributors, that is for the retailers, that is for the stockists, even for the manufacturers. They'll be forced to incur an extra cost, which will be passed to the final consumer. What is the impact? We've really been complaining on the government increasing taxes every year on excess duty. That excess duty is passed to the consumer. This is another extra unpredicted cost that has to be passed to the consumers. And the most unfortunate thing is this, that the normal complaints that I've been making and we've been making as an association, that illicit is going to go up, counterfeits are going to increase, as this thing is going to, as we're going towards this Mandamano. This is the way out. And this is the request that we have for Kenyans. I don't know why you're forgetting that in 2008 we were in this country. The same politicians, they've just changed political parties and what have you, are the ones who are fighting, and we were on these sides and the other sides. And after lives were lost, properties and what have you, one day they took a cup of coffee and drank. Whereas lives had been lost, a lot of properties was lost. I don't know why Kenyans were forgetting about that. These are people who know one another. These are children. These are people whose children have intermarried. Let me also remind you something else. There were demonstrations before handshake, and we were actually at this point where this country and this economy is at the cliff. We don't know what will happen from next week. We don't know the impact. We don't know the loss that we're going to incur. We're actually at a very high uncertainty. We're headed towards uncertainty. And that's why we're asking Kenyans, why are you forgetting that these are the same politicians? In fact, it is the same people who are acting the movie in Handshake, who were there in 2008 and all the others. So we are calling on Kenyans to have a sober conversation. I support anything that is constitutional, anything that is going to operate, that is going to be operated within the law, we support. But you're calling on Kenyans, please, let us not go extra constitutional. Let us not engage in things that are going to harm our businesses. Because if we engage in mandamanos and then I have to fire people, the same people participating in mandamanos are the same people who we are going to relieve.
Some. Let me get to Simon. Simon, then, if you are to stay off the streets of the Central Business District, because the centerpiece for the operation of matatus in the city is within the Central Business District, what does that mean then for the drivers and the other dependents along the chain of the dependents who, have or are beneficiaries of the often cash flow that comes with the matatu industry?
Well, as a service industry, you know very well that we would want to provide door-to-door service, which makes people more efficient and productive when they go to their places of work. And of course, definitely, there are very many, if I listed for you the beneficiaries, who now are the losers, the ones who are being affected. If you look at the consumption of fuel in this country, majorly is done by transport. We consume a unit, a vehicle, one minibus can consume up to 60 liters a day. And we talk of, if it is Nairobi, we have over 20,000 units. So there are those working in the petroleum industry and failing to sell petrol, fuel, then definitely you understand the effects. There are no revenues. And when we go to, if you go to Kirinyaga Road, the spare parts dealers. I mean, without us on the road, most spare parts shop stock spares for matatus because we operate for 14 hours. So imagine all this time, every vehicle needs to be put in shape, so it requires to be repaired. Look at the tires. We look at Jua Kali. You go to Kirinyaga Road. All those people, majority of them rely on public transport in terms of to move and at the same time to repair them. And we have employees. The government cannot get taxes from either of the places affected already. And the effects are enormous. One thing that I would want to say is that, the biggest weapon for humankind is fear. If somebody sells you fear, then it can confine you in an area. You cannot be involved in anything. So what we would want to add here is we would want legal channels to be used in all these problems that are facing politicians. And probably I would say, then if this happens every electioneering time, then we should ask the politicians to change the constitution to allow a handshake in the constitution after election, so that it doesn't affect our businesses or Kenyans in general. So Kenyans should be patriotic, as one of the gentlemen there had said. We need to be patriotic and understand that politicians' interests are not yours. It's theirs. It's personal. It's to benefit themselves, not you. So for us, we should think, how do we survive? So we would want to do business in an environment that is fair to every person. When we look at public transport, one unit costs over 6 million. That is your capital. And there are many costs that, that are involved in operationalizing it. So what requires is that let's all Kenyans reason. Let the politicians do their work the best way they know, without involving us to get into anarchy. Thank you. Okay,
Sami, yes. The growing political tension, the government depends on the taxpayers for taxes. The opposition maintains that we need you people on the streets, and that is for their cause, which is to protest against the government. In the end, it's the same people who are Kenyans by extension, with no regard for their political party belonging, their religious affiliation, or their ethnic makeup. I mean, why do you think that suddenly the Kenyan people, I mean, when we talk about the violence here, it's perpetrated by the very same Kenyans we share a national identity with, and this is largely driven by politics and the politicians. The government depends on these very same Kenyans and you, the stakeholders, for taxes to grow the economy. Why suddenly do you think the Kenyan public is so naive in becoming a punching bag for the political establishment?
I think there's a section of us Kenyans, and that's a section of young people who are vulnerable. Because of their situation, they are not employed, and so they are being used by these politicians to cause anarchy in this country. When you look at the situation at hand, what is the opposition picketing and demonstrating about? It's demonstrating about the cost of living, the cost of unga, the cost of petroleum, the cost of manufacturing in this country, and that's a policy issue. That is something they have members of parliament who have been elected within their political parties to be able to legislate such kind of policies in parliament. And so those are policy issues which are now being expressed in the streets. So when you look at the manner to which they are doing that, it's very questionable. And so they're taking advantage of the vulnerability of unemployment in this country, and they're sabotaging the economy. Look at the amount of money Boniface is saying Kenya Revenue Authority is not collecting on a daily basis 200 million, plus many other sectors, as Mr. Kimutai is saying. Look at the viral effect, look at the ripple effect of what's happening in this economy. So when you look at that, you are seeing a sinister move by this political class. And I think it's a high time Kenyans, we are able to take responsibility in our hands. And even when you're talking about the constitution, we have the power to recall these politicians, because we delegated that power to you. Okay. We took you to parliament to legislate our issues. We didn't take you to parliament so that you can take advantage of us. And I think that's what is happening. And this discussion is very important, so that Kenyans can now open their eyes, because we cannot have this diabolical cycle every time. That every time we have an election, we have to be a handshake. Every time we have an election, before we stabilize and we settle down as businesses, we have eaten into 3 years of one term. So when you are entering the 4th year, the political now temperatures go up. And who is being affected? The common mwananchi. The same government is squeezing us to pay taxes. The opposition is squeezing us to go to the streets. So when you're looking at that, and I think it's a high time, and that question comes in handy right now, it's a high time as Kenyans and as patriotic Kenyans, can we be able to interrogate who we put in those seats? Let us not recycle politicians. There are people who are here and there are people who are there who come to us and ask us for votes. And when we listen to them, we do not vote people based on merit in this country. And it's very unfortunate. We vote people based on what they are giving us, our stomach. And we cannot be able to move to the next level. And let me say this as I end. You see, you cannot burn your house because a snake has entered in the house. Okay. You can't burn your house. So what will you do? You're going to mobilize your neighbors and remove the snake. So what will happen is, in such a place, for example, we have all these issues that we are having. We cannot ban Kenya because there is an unfortunate situation of the cost of living is up. So what should we do? All the stakeholders should sit down and agree. This is the problem that we are having. How are we going to solve this problem? The stakeholders have said, Boniface, and Chairman here and Mr. Kimutai, we are saying, let's look at avenues of policy, because regimes comes and regimes go. Okay. But policies are laws that are going to govern our economy, whichever regime that comes on board. So the issue here that we have, or the challenge that we have here, can be solved. If it's about arbitration, let there be arbitration. All right. Whatever needs to be done, let it be done, because we cannot burn down our country. We will not do that, Mr.
Okay, okay, yes, Simon? Okay, we'll be getting back to Simon shortly. Coming to you, Kevin, what then does this portend for the many unemployed riders who depend on the border to earn a living daily?
This means that if the mandamano continues and these guys don't make any income, then they will also become thieves, because they will not sleep hungry, and they see some other people. Now it will force us, the border riders, to start breaking into the liquor stores of these guys to take anything that is there, to break into the shop to see if there is any money there. So I think the situation is going to be worse, depending that now these border riders, they are young people, energetic, and they also have families to feed. And considering the mental status right now for the male people, it is becoming a challenge for the country, and taking the young people being more idle, doing nothing, and they should be earning something, then that means most of them will become thugs, because there's no way someone is going to sleep hungry and another person is eating. Then it means they will come for this, the mighty ones. Because if you are sending us to demonstrate and there's nothing that you are giving us to eat, then it means we'll come for you now to eat you up. So I think it is high time. For me, my request is that let the government and the opposition sit wherever they will want to sit, do whatever they will do, even if they don't want to talk, but let them give us peace of mind as the Kenyan people in this country, so that we can move on with our life. Because when you look deeply, these politicians, nobody pays us, nobody gives us money. After we have elected them, they have gone. Nobody comes back to feed us. We have to look for all the ways in our own ways to feed ourselves. Until 5 years are over, that's when they always come back again. And I think that is now what should stick in the young people's mind, that once you elect these leaders, there's no way they're going to help you. Unless they put in proper policies, they build for you a road, they build for you, they make sure that there is enough production in the country, there's nothing else they can do for you. Everything depends on you as a young person to feed your family, to feed your relatives and all those things.
Okay, Boniface, at the end of the 2016 protest, this was in light of the then opposition Coalitions for Reform and Democracy Court, which had pushed out then IEBC from office. That was the protests that were held on Monday and on Tuesdays. At the end of the 2016 protests, 44% of businesses felt that the economic conditions had worsened, and 56% that the political climate had worsened, according to a poll done at the time. Coming from against the backdrop of a pandemic that largely ravaged the global economy, including ours, job stagnations and layoffs by companies in the country because of the political and economic environment, and now that coupled with these protests 2 days in a week. What then do you see going forward as a consequence with regards to how the businesses will fare, you as a stakeholder included?
First of all, let me comment on something, because, you know, every time when you, as a business owner, because we don't do politics. As we're business owners, what we want is a conducive environment for us to operate. But we have seen the two major political leaders, they've already taken their stand, even from the way we listened to Kisii and the other side. So when you issue a statement, you judge as if you're on one side or the others. The only thing that we want, and that is why I'm calling on our leaders, is we want a conducive environment to operate. I don't know, and I want to guide these hardliners who are behind the two leaders. I don't know who's telling them that if one of them blinks fast, they're going to lose supporters, because that is a fear that they have. Because at the end of the day, we have seen the headline that has been taken by the president. We have seen the headline that has been taken by the opposition leader. We are standing at a point where we are headed for another week of 2 days of demonstrations, day of protest, and we don't know what will follow the week after. So my request is one, and I think the two leaders, both of them, they talk of their I don't know, they go to church or they're church people. I want to read them a verse. Proverbs 28:2. When a country is rebellious, it has many rulers. But a ruler, this one I'm directing to President William Ruto, but a ruler with discernment and knowledge maintains order. We are calling on the presidency, because you are the one who was elected. You are the one who was elected through the constitutional process. Please offer leadership. Stop listening to these young guys who are behind you, these guys who are telling you to be hard. The harder we are going to be, the harder we are going to stand, the worse this economy is going to be hit. If the dollar reached at a point of 150, nowadays we're even fearing to import. We're fearing you can't import because, let me tell you, you will just burn out. Look at the Nairobi Stock Exchange, the way it is performing very, very hard. This guy, or this gentleman you're talking about, Raila Odinga, this is the gentleman whom you pushed until he became the prime minister. Why are we forgetting about that? So we are calling on the two leaders. We are not taking any sides because we are not politicians. We are here because for the interest of our children. We are here for the interest of this nation. The church has spoken. It is dismissed. And we know and we believe that I'll talk about three leaders. That is the president, the deputy, and the opposition leader. They are highly matured people and even highly matured politicians and responsible leaders who can come up and hear the cry of the business community, because that is what we represent. Because if we look at another week of that hardline stance, we will be worse off more than those called demonstrations that you're talking about.
And you talked about the church. It has been very clear. On Sunday, Archbishop, the Diocese of Nairobi, Philip Anyolo, said on behalf of the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops that we are heading the path of anarchy if the current situation is not addressed. And they had a message for the president, who they called upon to extend an olive branch and reach out, for he is a symbol of national unity. They called also on the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga to use the available constitutional mechanisms and the pathway that is provided for in law. They also urged the Kenyan people to live in peace and harmony. Would you then also add your voice to that from the perspective of not sudden, we are all, of course, men of God, but from the business perspective of telling them these are the numbers. If we lose 2 billion a day from your organization alone, talking about 5, then that's about 10 billion Kenya shillings a day. And at the end of the day, they expect you, the Kenyan people, to pay taxes. I mean, would you mind adding your voices to that from the taxes perspective and the growth of the economy? Actually,
the first thing, which is a request that I had for the church, and I'm happy because also the Muslim community has spoken. Let me address the church because I'm a Christian. I like to call on the church to stop being partisan. Because when we go to church, we don't go to church because we are members of this political side or this other side. And this is the point where we need you guys to pray for this country. The National Association, our association, is going to plan for national prayers for the sake of this nation. So we are calling on the church and all the friends of these leaders, the three of them, Honorable President, Honorable Deputy President, and even the opposition leaders. We know that there are so many friends of them who are Christians, Muslims. Please offer guidance to this nation. Let us not wait, because we've even seen when you listen to our friends in Kisumu, when you listen to our friends in the mountain or maybe in Rift Valley, they've already taken political stance supporting their leaders.
Okay.
Let us not go to the way of anarchy, because that is where we are headed. Let us not reach at a point where we are going to lose our lives and lose our properties and lose our nation for us to come to our senses and call for dialogue or for a conversation.
Okay, Simon, I come to you. Boniface mentions the amount that they have lost, that is 2 billion Kenya shillings. And this is an amount that would otherwise, if channeled towards the Kenya Revenue Authority, would help in the growth of the economy. From your end as an association, for the Monday protest, what figures are we talking about in terms of the losses?
Well, you know, it's difficult to quantify, especially when we have numbers like what we have in public transport. But we know in a day, gross collections are over $1 billion. So when we talk of losses, now we go to do some cost accounting. But all in all, is enormous. It runs in hundreds of millions. Now, what I just want to say is that demonstrations are making life, actually it's making life worse. Every day as time tickles, today it will not be like tomorrow when we demonstrate again. This is what Kenyans should realize, that you could shout in the streets, and you do not, then the next day when you go to buy anything in the shop, the price will have doubled. And if you go further, it keeps increasing. So the effects are enormous, and Kenyans should realize that. And one thing is that Kenyans should know is that we demonstrate because of selfish interests of a few politicians, either in both sides. Those interests should be looked at very keenly. And they don't care because they don't feel the pain of the inflation. And what we should be looking at is bettering our lives and businesses for the future of this country. It will depend on the middle and the lower classes. The bigger class will always fly out when we have problems in the country. Most probably, I would tell you, most of their children are not schooling here. They are not here. And they are not even joining them in demonstrations. So one thing that we should tell Kenyans is that we are causing trouble for ourselves. Mm-hmm. We are causing things that will affect us, not them. And yet we fight for them in the positions they are holding. And this politicians should also know that power lies with us. You know, politicians are either protecting their power position, and those who do not have are looking for power, either through backdoor or through using us to demonstrate. So Kenyans should understand that this country should get away from those dangerous paths, because if we get involved so much, then what happens? Lawlessness. Mwenye nguvu utampisha, and the law will not be applicable. So what we want to say is that the effect is not only about us not having money as business community. No, the effects are lives of people in this country, especially those who are on the lower cadre. So one thing is that, as the speaker has said, it at times calls for reason. And the only problem with politicians who only think of the reason is to share power. And that's what we've seen all along. The handshakes is about sharing the power you have. So that's why I mentioned that let it be enshrined in the Constitution that when you lose, then you still become part of it, not to check the government, but to ensure that you also have power. That's what's happening. So they should enshrine handshake in the Constitution, because this thing happens every 5 years. So I think politicians should look at many things. They should look at many things in terms of looking at the country and the people there who have elected them. They are our servants. They are not supposed to be our masters. So one thing is that our lives must be, in a good way, protected by the government. But the way we are going now is that anarchy. It can be terrible, and let them know that there are countries who go on that path and what has happened.
Okay, Simon, when you talk about the need for the constitutionalization of handshakes, I mean, in this case, to cite examples of what transpired in 1997, that was Odinga Moi, the late Moi, then the Grand Coalition government in the aftermath of the post-election skirmishes, and in 2018, in March, when the handshake happened between Odinga and Kenyatta. I mean, but the people we're talking about in this case, the Kenyan people, gave themselves a constitution that only recognizes a government upon which a mandate is delivered by the Kenyan people for the governance of the country. Isn't that not institutionalization of further political interests of a political class that you have largely blamed for the economic stagnation of the country?
Yes, you know, one thing is that there are rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. And these rights now are being exploited and over-exaggerated. So, and if we are having this coming every now and then, every time after 5 years we have it, maybe let's maybe another 5 years opposition will take the present opposition. Then what happens to the present, those who will be in the opposition?
Demonstration.
Will they also behave in the manner that will make them unable to govern? So these are the things that should be looked at. And I think also there should be a review of the Constitution, because what is happening is that every time we have these things happening, we look at the Constitution and we find a section that allows people to do picketing only when it is peaceful, but somehow we know Kenyans. How is it controlled? To what strength? To what extent? So some of these things, people should look at them very seriously. Politicians should not only think of, protecting their positions. No, they should look at Kenyans in general, because the way they are taking us now, I think it's a wrong path, and it should be condemned in all ways. Let them discuss. Let them go to Parliament. Those in Parliament, let them discuss. Let them have their own ways of discussing outside Parliament to ensure that the interests should be Kenyans, not their own selfish interests. Yeah. Okay,
Simon, one final question. Then why then do you think that the crop of leadership we have at the moment seems to lack the vision as to the larger picture of economic and political stability?
I lost you.
Okay, just to come up again, why then do you think the current crop of leadership that we have in the country seem not to have the bigger vision of the country's political and economic stability?
Now, I wish Kenyans would be demonstrating in the streets to enlighten leaders on their responsibilities. You know, one thing is that once leaders are elected, they forget their role and their basic responsibilities and what they owe Kenyans. Then they go having selfish interests, amassing wealth, and thumping chests. One thing that Kenyans should demonstrate, not because of what we are seeing now, we should be demonstrating, demanding our leaders to provide our services. You know, one thing is that Kenyans, we have part to blame, because when it comes to election time, we look at, people can give us money, people can give us handouts. We don't look at leaders who can be described by the meaning of the word leadership. So now it comes to bite us, because Kenyans elect them, they disappear. Then what we hear demonstrations, we hear many things, and we don't look at what are qualifications of leaders. In most cases, actually, people go there because of their stomachs. Leadership should be leadership.
Okay.
It should be something provided by God.
Okay.
So it's something that enables Kenyans to get their rights that is described in the Constitution, not selfish.
Thank you. Thank you. Sami Karanja, yes, I come to you. Go ahead, please.
Well, we are losing our regional economic grip. And I'm looking at some of the statistics here. We account for 40% of the GDP of this region. Mm-hmm. You know, many times when you're having such a discussion and conversation, sometimes we narrow it down to even Kenya itself. But look at what we are losing regionally. Look at the economy, how we are affecting a regional economy by us having this kind of protests. And as Mr. Kimutai is saying, we have avenues to address these issues. We have the parliament, we have the Senate, where laws are being made. We are looking and we are calling upon our leaders to be patriotic enough. You know, there's a book that we read from Third World to First World, mm-hmm. The Singapore story. The writer, the Lee Wang Yu, the writer, talked about how leaders, transformational leaders, behave. And it's a high time that our leaders take that responsibility and that position as transformational leaders. Because you're not going to be in that seat forever. But Kenya is going to be here for a very long while. Our children are going to be here. Our children's children, our great-grandchildren are going to be here. And so it's a high time that these leaders take responsibility of why they were elected. And as Boniface said here, we are not politicians. What we need is a conducive environment for us to trade, for our livelihood to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. Some of our members, especially MSME Alliance of Kenya, some of our members, we do inter-border trade, a regional trade, supplies. You can't be able to supply, you can't be able to move from one country to another. You can't be able to move your goods from Kisumu across to Uganda. You cannot be able to move your goods from Murang'a or Kiambu across, to Tanzania. And look at the value chain that is being affected. And I think Ayub is a high time that we take responsibility as Kenyans, and we say, the leaders who we are going to elect, let them be elected by merit, not by what they are giving us. And it's a wake-up call for all of us, and especially for us in the business sector. And I call upon the government, when such issues come, let the stakeholders sit together. Let them fight their own battles in parliament, because that's where we elected them. But when it comes to the economic growth, let us have a conversation within that negotiating table and all the stakeholders to be brought on board, because their solutions of the economy are within the stakeholders and the organized groups that are already in place in this country.
Thank you. And let's now sample the feedback of the viewers who as well have sent in their contributions, and I will take your account, Kevin and Boniface Gashoka, and also Sam Kimutai, as regards to what Kenyans are saying. This one is from Bob Otieno Owino. He says the cost of demonstrations are devastating and have dire consequences, like losing of jobs. Lives are lost and scaring away of investors, hence leading to hurting the economy, which affects the common mwananchi, he says. Engineer Lazaro says Wananchi will continue to suffer just because of hardliners in both camps. One camp calling for an inclusive approach to national issues like building credible IEBC, another camp always thinking of protecting the government from handshake. MC_Ruma says the planned weekly demonstrations by Azimio will be devastating to the limping economy. Goons will take the opportunity to loot and destroy property. The Constitution allows picketing, but it should be peaceful. Police should protect lives and property. Kinyo Mushoki says Azimio mass action will have significant impacts on the economy, from the disruption of supply chains to influencing consumer behavior. It is important to consider both the intended and unintended consequences before taking collective action. Babu Michel KE says with the latest appointments of 50 chief administrative secretaries, giving over 800 million for the offices of Mr. Ruto, Gachagua and Mudavadi for cars, does this really show, or rather shows, that we were left with a dilapidated economy, a slap on the face for Kenyans? Honorable Lillian Sioe says the demonstrations will achieve one thing, which is total retrogression. Once your friends from Azimio see that this is the only solution, then our country is at risk of economic tumbling. Yes, Kevin, what's your reaction to the feedback by the viewers?
I think one of the viewers said that the country is tumbling economically, and the protests are really affecting us. Maybe what I can just say is that, you know, these two leaders, they are elders. And for me, as the Border National Chairman, I have over 1.6 million riders that look up to me. And now that the two elders have both hardliners with them, I can offer myself to mediate as a young person, as a young Kenyan, as a person who sees the future of this country, as a person who cares about the young people that are behind us, as a person who wants to see Kenya being great again. I can offer mediation between the President Ruto and His Excellency Raila Odinga. Now, let's come up as young people who think forward, who want our country to be first world. Because when we continue with this demonstration and every 5 years is about fighting, we fight for 5 years, and start again fighting for another 5 years, I think our country will be even fourth or fifth world. And we are championing, Kenya is an international hub for Africa. Everybody is proud of Kenya. Anybody who comes towards Africa dreams about visiting Kenya, but they will not come if our country is all about chaos. So peace of this country is very important for the region and for the world. So let these two leaders have a mediation. Let them sit down, let them talk, let them find a future for our country.
Okay. Yes, Boniface?
I'm very happy because I can see that we are actually, even Kenyans are speaking the same conversation. But what I would like to bring to your attention is this. In Uganda, we know how the government and the opposition behaves. But the opposition in Uganda has called on President Museveni, something that has never happened, to come to this country, Kenya, and ensure that he brings mediation because of the negative impact that the economy is going to get due to instability of this country.
Being a landlocked country.
Being a landlocked country. It is the opposition that is calling on the presidency, which is something that has never happened. So we are calling on actually, my colleague has even talked about Parliament and Senate. Yeah. I'd like to bring to the attention of the two speakers of the Senate and Parliament. We are not happy about the way that place is being run. The shouting and what have you. What is doing to Kenyans and what is doing to us, the common mwananchi, is just raising the temperatures unnecessarily. We are calling on the National Assembly and the Senate to also be run professionally. We don't want to see all those. There are so many standing orders and so many rules that guide that house. Let it get its honor back. Because what we've been seeing for the last 1 month or two, from even both sides, the majority leader, the minority leader, we're not happy about what is going on there. We are losing credibility of those assemblies. So I am happy because, and I would still like to call on the church and the business community. Let us continue talking to the two leaders until we reach at a point. Let us work on a solution before we get to anarchy. Let us avoid this whole fear of working together as leaders. These politicians, President Ruto and President Raila, you have worked together in previous engagements.
Thank you.
So we are calling on you guys to sober up, please, and give us a conducive environment for us to operate.
Thank you. Yes, Simon, your final words on this, and what then the week coming looks like, owing to an additional day by the opposition, which is on Thursday.
Well, first, I would like to call for sobriety. Let all leaders be sober. Let them think about Kenyans. Let them think about people who elected them to be in those positions. And let me not be a prophet of doom that I'm going to prophesy what will happen in next week in case of, when there will be demonstrations. Let me be a person who's going to be optimistic, who will think that we will have gone over this. As we have talked as leaders in various industries, we have told leaders whom we elected, who are supposed to be our servants, that they should not take us to this path of anarchy. We want to see Kenyans prosper. We want to see leaders give us right way to follow. Because as a leader, you're elected to be at the front and show us way, but not way to war or way to, misunderstandings and not being able to reason with one another. So for me, as a national chairman of Matatu Owners Association, we want to tell our leaders that we are going on dangerous paths, and we need to sober up and take us back to where we belong in prospering. So that is my say. I don't want to be a prophet. We hope that this will have been ironed out before going back to these demonstrations. And then one thing is that, let me also ask those who keep planning for demonstration, is it sustainable? Is it sustainable to go to demonstrations twice in a week? What are you subjecting us to? Those are the questions. And those in power want to tell them, please talk to these guys. You have a way.
Okay.
If there are a way that needs to make it go well, then go that way.
Thank you. Yes, Sami.
Well, let me end.
And briefly.
Yes, let me end with this. There's a quote I want to read by Seth Godin. He says, transformational leaders don't start by denying the world around them. Instead, they describe a future they would like to create instead. So I'm calling upon leaders to be transformational leaders. People who think Kenya before anything else. Because right now we are burning up our country because of these demonstrations. Picketing is constitutional, but let's direct these energies in the right platforms, because it's about policy, it's not about selfish motives. And I like to call upon all the business leaders, let us have a conversation with the government and show them the kind of effects it's doing in the business arena. And we are ready to sit with all the stakeholders, as my panelist is saying, and make sure that this country grows to the next level, and make sure that our economic state is exponential growth is experienced in this country. Thank you, Ayub.
And thank you so much. Yes, Kevin, briefly.
Yeah, maybe the last punch is that I just want to call on all border riders across the country to maintain peace. Peace is paramount for their own good.
Okay. Yes, Boniface.
Maybe on the last thing is to call on all the members in the liquor sector to join the association, and we work together as a team.
Thank you so much, and your time is all appreciated. To Boniface Gashoka, the Secretary General, the Bar, Hoteliers and Liquor Association of Kenya, your time is all appreciated. Kevin Mubadi is the National Chairperson, the Border Association of Kenya. Simon Kimutai is the National Chairperson, the Matatu Owners Association of Kenya. And Sami Karanja is the Chief Executive Officer, the Medium, Small and Micro Enterprises Alliance of Kenya. Your time is all appreciated. Gentlemen, at a time when the government said that the economy has taken a substantial blow following the protest held by the opposition on Monday, even as calls for reconciliation, politically that is, continue to mount on the president and the opposition chief. Nonetheless, those stakeholders continue to express concern about the stagnation of businesses around the country. At the end, Kenyans again will have to contend with uncertainty that often engulfs the country after electoral cycles. What way out? We'll see you next time on the broadcast. Good morning.